All right, perfect. Okay. So, I'm Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking about the faults of standardized testing. So, I'm sure y'all have all seen this picture before, at least somewhere, and if you've not, now you have. This picture is accompanied by a quote by Albert Einstein that says, "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." And this is a take on how standardized testing treats our students. It fails to recognize, like, each student comes from a different background and has different stuff going on and different skill sets. And some of those skills aren't equipped to help students with a certain type of test, much like if you asked a fish to climb a tree. So we're going to start with talking about what standardized testing is. I'm sure you've all taken one. If you haven't, you're lucky. But a standardized test is a test that's administered and scored following a certain standard. And oftentimes the questions are predetermined, like way ahead of time. So there's already a right answer, and you're either right or you're wrong. So it makes it incredibly fast and easy for teachers or school districts to grade you and not look deeper into why you might have picked the choice that you picked. There's not a lot of leniency. And I would consider myself a credible source because, I mean, we've been taking standardized tests almost all our lives. I think we started like tax tests when we were like 8, which is crazy. But anyway, I'm also studying to become a school teacher. So assuming this is still a thing when I graduate college, I'll have to administer these myself. And so my thesis is we as a country need to abolish standardized testing or at least find a better alternative to assess our students because these tests cause heightened stress, do not take account for the unique factors in students, and distract kids from what school is actually about, which is learning. And so my purpose of this presentation is to convince y'all that we need to make a change here. All right, so getting into that first reason, we should get rid of standardized tests. It heightens stress, and again, like I'm sure y'all have all experienced this, but so standardized tests are a major cause of stress in students across the country. Most of y'all probably had to take either an SAT or an ACT. I know, like with COVID, it was a little weird because some schools didn't require you to turn it in, but I mean, before that, you had to take this test, you had to turn it into your college. And that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody who's as young as high school students are. I mean, you're basically told, like, if you don't do well on this test, you're not going to get into a good college and you're not going to be able to get a job when you graduate, which is absolutely crazy that they make it seem like our whole future rides on this one thing. But students also may face increased pressure from their parents and friends to do better in school and achieve a higher grade, which leads to kids resenting school and not wanting to go or learn. And their self-esteem can also drop because their grade might be lower than somebody else's. So there's a lot of comparison. That's really all this is about. So I have a little statistic here on what parents think about this, because most school systems' philosophy is like standardized testing is going to get our kids ready for college. It's good. It teaches them about real life skills, but a lot of people feel differently. So public school parents who say there's too much emphasis on testing, that's 67%, whereas only 14% of parents say testing is very important in measuring school effectiveness. And then, so 66% of parents oppose using test scores to evaluate teacher performance. So that's well over half of parents of kids in public schools don't like standardized testing, which should be enough to get rid of that. So the next reason we should definitely get rid of standardized tests kind of draws back to that picture I showed you at the very beginning. These tests don't take account for unique differences in the students. And one of the biggest factors would be a student's socioeconomic status. It's pretty much a fact that kids in higher income households or areas are doing better with their test scores. And that could be for a lot of reasons. One being they have access to a lot more resources than most kids. Like their parents can hire them tutors. Higher income schools will typically have better like before or after school programs like tutorials and such where kids can go in and go that extra mile and learn. Whereas in low income areas, there's not nearly as many opportunities. And another unique factor that could have a large effect on the results of a standardized test are disabilities. Like lots of people have learning disabilities, whether it's as simple as, like dyslexia or kids with autism and Down syndrome. Students interpret things differently, and that becomes very hard when you give a question to a kid that they might not even be able to understand what that question is asking them. So that's a problem. And the last thing is, oh, hold on, it disappeared. Okay, there we go. The last thing is learning the material. So the emphasis on getting good grades on these tests is so large that kids aren't even really focusing on what they're supposed to be learning. They're just cramming and trying to memorize for the test. And then once they've taken the test, the information pretty much like leaves. Like you don't retain anything at all. I know I was guilty of that. I don't remember a lot of what I learned in high school, and I'm sure y'all could probably say the same thing. But that's what we were there to do. We were there to learn what they were teaching us. And it sucks that they put so much emphasis on memorizing every little thing. So in conclusion, to improve our education system and the learning experience of our students, we have to get rid of standardized tests. And this is because of the added stress from test scores, the disregard for unique qualities in students that could potentially and will most definitely affect their test scores, and the hesitation to actually take the time to learn the course material. And so my last thing, I'm going to give y'all some solutions. So obviously this is a problem that cannot go unnoticed because it affected us when we were in school. If we have children, this will affect them and the entire next generation. And so some things we could do to combat standardized testing is we could implement a more open concept grading system. So instead of assessing what our students have learned through these tests that are so specific, we could give them more creative projects where they have a little more freedom expressing what they've learned. In this, there's pretty much no right or wrong with that. They're showing you what they've learned, and you can grade them based on how much they know. And we also need to pass some type of legislation restricting the use of these standardized tests to make sure it stays out of the classroom. So when you go out to the polls to vote, just pay attention to what certain candidates' philosophies on education are, because that's a big way. Oh, it disappeared again. But that's a big way you could see a change there. And then lastly, I just have all my sources. So thank y'all very much.
Okay, thank you.